Hello and welcome to Rulebreaker. Today we're going to take a look at one of the new races from the Twilight Imperium 4th edition expansion Prophecy of Kings. In this case the Naaz-Rohka Alliance. So the Naaz and the Rokha, they're like two halves of the one alliance. The Rokha are like distant cousins of the Hakan, and the Naaz are these like weird little tiny dudes who sit on seats on their shoulders. I love the theming of these guys, they're really fun. Their backstory essentially is they these little guys, they got invaded by the Winu back in the past, when they were just kind of starting off being really smart and really cool, and before they could really settle and set up a civilization. But now they've united with the Rokha, and together they're kind of a superpower, trying to be badasses in the galaxy like every other faction in the game, I guess. So let's take a look at how you start the game with these guys. Alright, so the Naaz-Rokha are a bit different in a lot of ways actually. They don't start with any of the technologies from the base game. They start with two techs from the expansion, and they are psychoarchaeology and the AI development algorithm. So I'll just go through those briefly here now. Psychoarchaeology, you can use technology specialities on planets you control without exhausting them, even if those planets are exhausted. So, you know, a flat discount on prereqs for techs, super good. During the action phase, you can exhaust planets you control that have technology specialities to gain one trade good. So again, another use for those planet cards, get some trade goods. Yeah, really useful utility. Interesting, really cool. AI development algorithm. When you research a unit upgrade technology, you may exhaust this card to ignore any one prerequisite. When one or more of your units use production, you may exhaust this card to reduce the combined cost of the produced units by the number of unit upgrade technologies that you own. So kind of like a rolling continuous bonus. The more unit technologies that you build, the cheaper they are to keep going with. Yeah, making, you know, sometimes out of reach things like the War Sun much more feasible. Yeah, that's what they start with tech wise. Their starting units, quite different to everybody else actually. They start with two carriers, which is really nice. They have a destroyer, they get two fighters, one mech, which is one of the new units, 3 infantry, and a space dock. So let's take a look at their home system. Alright, here we are. It's a 2-planet system with Naaz and Rokha, the two neighboring planets. They're kind of like a nice mirror of each other. 2 resources and 1 influence on Naaz, 1 resource and 2 influence on Rokha, a 3/3 total. 6 is good. I think that's, yeah, it's pretty good. Bit of variety there, lots of influence, and a normal enough amount of resources, so not too bad. When you look at your units all down on the 1 hex, you can see that they're kind of primed for going to nearby systems and starting to expand, with their mech unit being their novelty start item that they have, making them a little bit different. Alright, let's check out their racial abilities. Their first one is called Distant Suns, which is a nice throwback to 3rd edition for anybody who's played that. And it says, when you explore a planet that contains one of your mechs, you may draw 1 additional card. Choose 1 to resolve and discard the rest. So the new explorer mechanism basically is, when you take over a planet for the first time, you can explore it to get different cards. What the Naaz-Rokha are doing here is they're looking at 2 and keeping 1, so kind of keeping the best of 2 options. If they explore with their mech present, and you'll see they like mechs. They're gonna have their mechs going. That's kind of one of their things, and also exploration. So this is a pretty obvious thing to keep in mind when thinking about these guys. Their second ability is an action, so this could be the whole thing you do on your turn, either as a stall tactic or because you want to do it. And it reads, either purge 2 of your relic fragments of the same type to gain 1 relic, or purge 1 of your relic fragments to gain a command token. Yeah, so normally you would need to have 3 fragments of the same relic in order to purge them to gain a relic card, but the Naaz-Rokha essentially reduces that cost to 2, making it a lot easier to start getting some of these. And these cards are actually really strong in the game, so this is a very viable strategy to victory by buffing up your dudes and getting more points and stuff. So definitely something to not underestimate when you're playing as the Naaz-Rokha. The Naaz-Rokha have a pretty standard layout of regular unit troops and ships and that sort of stuff, nothing out of the ordinary. So let's just take a look at their flagship in more detail. Alright, so the Vizelvir is the flagship for the Naaz-Rohka Alliance. It's pretty simple actually. It reads, your mechs in this system roll 1 additional die during combat, which is pretty good, especially for these guys. Other than that, it's pretty standard. It has sustained damage, has a cost of 8. It has terrible combat though. It needs a 9 higher to hit on 2 dice. And it has 1 move. It has 4 capacity, which is slightly more than normal. So the ship itself, not awesome in combat or for much practical use, but really what you're doing is you're using it with the mechs at the same time to roll as many dice as possible, try and get as many hits as you can. It really is as straightforward as that for the flagship. Alright, let's take a look at the different racial abilities, racial technologies that the Naaz-Rokha have. So they've got 2, just like everybody else, and none of them are unit upgrades, they're both technologies. The first one is prefab arcologies, and this reads, after you explore a planet, ready that planet. So normally when you conquer a planet, it comes in exhausted, but with this one you can use the planet right away. So for example, if you conquer the planet of Sodor, normally you would get it exhausted, you would be able to use it. With the Naaz-Rokha, you would actually get it face up as long as you're exploring it, and you explore it when you are the only player who's been there in the game the first time. This doesn't apply if somebody else owned the planet and then you take it over. That doesn't work that way. It's only when you do the explore on the planet. Their other faction technology is Supercharge, and that reads, at the start of a combat round you may exhaust this card to apply +1 to the result of each of your unit's combat rolls during this combat round. So the key thing about this one to remember is that it's at the start of a combat round. A combat round is not necessarily the first round of combat in a space combat, so you can do it right away when a combat starts, or you can see what happens in the first round and then exhaust this in the second round if you really want to. Not sure how efficient that might be, but maybe you kind of really need a big hit. If you've had a lot of misses or something, you don't want to lose units, and that's what Supercharge gives you here. Yeah, so there you go. And a quick look at their promissory note. So it is a black market forgery. It is an action, and remember that this is the action for the other player when you give them this promissory note, not for you. And the action is purge 2 of your relic fragments of the same type to gain a relic, then return this card to the Naaz-Rokha player, which is basically the same as the second ability on the Naaz-Rokha's player sheet, fabrication. It's exactly the same thing, just somebody else gets to do it, and then they'd hand this back to you to trade off to somebody else. This is pretty powerful. The relics are great. It is only a discount of 1 relic fragment though. Maybe it's something you can give to somebody who's in your alliance, or someone you want to catch up, or to annoy the other players at the table and get something in return for it. It might be useful that way. So I see this one getting a lot of play in the game. I think it's one of the better promissory notes for gameplay reasons. So I'm really impressed by that one. Super fun. Okay, let's take a look at the mechs and the leaders. Alright, so I love these new boards that come with the game for the leaders and the mechs. They're awesome. The Naaz-Rokha have some pretty good stuff for this board actually. The main thing being their mech. Obviously you've heard me talk about that a lot in the video so far. They have Garvin Gunn, which is their agent. They have Dart and Tai, their commander, and Hesh and Prit, their hero. So let's just go through these one by one. Garvin Gunn, so you have these guys from the start of the game. At the end of a player's turn, so that's any player, you may exhaust this card to allow that player to explore one of their planets. So you can exhaust it, and then another player will get to explore a planet. It can be you as well, obviously, so most of the time it's going to be you, but it might be something that you can, you know, get on somebody's good side, saying, hey, I'll exhaust Garvin Gunn in order to let you exhaust something or to explore something if you do something for me. So there's a little bit of diplomacy going on here as an option for this, if you like. Dart and Tie, they're unlocked when you have mechs in 3 systems. You flip this over and it has a new ability, and the ability is, after you gain control of a planet that was controlled by another player, you may explore that planet. So normally you can only explore when you are the first person to take a planet. With the Naaz-Rokha, you can explore even if you take it off somebody else, so that's an advantage, and it really hurries exploration up for them, making it really viable, making it super interesting for you to like chase fragments and get loads of abilities from different relics and different exploration cards. So these guys are pretty much the Explorer faction, as you can see. Their hero, Hesh and Prit, unlock, have 3 scored objectives, pretty standard. It's usually the way it is with heroes. When you've scored your 3rd objective, you flip it over and you get Perfect Synthesis, and that reads action. So, you know, an action, like you can, like an action card or a tactical action, it's your go basically when you do this. And it reads, gain 1 relic, so straight up get a relic card, and perform the secondary ability of up to 2 readied or unchosen strategy cards. During this action, spend command tokens from your reinforcements instead of your strategy pool, then purge this card. So this is a once per game ability. You get a relic and then you do 2 strategy cards that weren't chosen. So like Imperium, leadership, etc. Do the secondary ability of any 2 of those that weren't chosen. And then you can spend command tokens from your reinforcements instead of your strategy pool when doing that. That's pretty cool. So doing this is a real kind of a Hail Mary move you're going to do to like get a big advantage, because once you've done it, it's gone for the rest of the game and you've no hero anymore. And last but certainly not least is Eidolon. I think I pronounced that correctly. Their mech unit, and this one is double-sided. Okay, it has 2 different things going on. It says on the card here that it starts this side face up, so you can't really get that wrong. So just make sure of that when you're setting up the game. And it reads, if this unit is in the space area of the active system at the start of a space combat, flip this card. So you can flip it over to the other side, and it's a little different. It's not as good, right? So this version has sustained damage, it has a cost of 2 and a combat of 6, but with 2 dice, which is different to lots of other mechs. So if you have to flip it, it changes into the Z-Grav Eidolon, which then reads, if this unit is in the space area of the active system, it is also a ship. But you see, there's the difference, right? It's now able to take part in combat as a ship. So you can have it going in as an attacking ship, you can have it as a defending ship before it does anything on the ground. At the end of a space battle in the active system, flip this card. So after the space battle, it flips back over and suddenly it's the ground unit again, and it can be involved in ground combat, and it's better with 6 instead of 8 when it's on the ground. So essentially what the mech is both the ship when you're in that part of the phase, and then it's suddenly a ground unit when you're in planetary combat. So very versatile mech, and again, you're going to want the 3 of them out there because it gives you access to Dart and Tie, and also mechs and exploring is your thing. You're going to want to do as much of that as you possibly can. So there you go, the Naaz-Rohka Alliance. Very different faction. If you're used to Twilight Imperium and you're coming into the expansion, these are one of the ones that are like, hey, they use all the new different things like the mechs and the explorer action. Yeah, and they're pretty straightforward unit wise other than that, so you can kind of focus on these 2 new mechanisms and get going and see what that's all about. Yeah, so that's them. Really interesting faction, very excited to give them a go. And that is the end of the video. So if you enjoyed it, there are more coming. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and we will see you very soon.